gang. This is episode 2. My friend Christopher Kelley. He puts a comma and a Ph.D. at the end. Hey, Chris, how have you been?
I've been all right. I've been real good, you know. Just life in Brooklyn.
Right on. So what's new? What's happening with you?
What's new? I did a talk at the Strand bookstore last night on Buddhism and dark comedy, which is one of my favorite topics. We look at clips of Louis C.K. And we analyze them through the lens of Tibetan Buddhism. So I think there's a lot in common. It actually kind of started. I teach at the New School, and I have a class there on Asian religions, and we were just starting the Buddhism section. And the first teaching of the Buddha is the Four Noble Truths, and the first truth is life is suffering. Right? Old age, sickness, and death just really suck. That's the first noble truth. And you know, to a room full of 20-year-olds, 19-year-olds, like the idea of getting old and getting sick really isn't something they probably not had too much experience.
It's not entirely present for most of them. Yeah.
So sort of out of desperation, I happen to have some clips of Louis on my computer, and from his television show. So I played that, and it was a total hit, and they got it. And that's what I mean by hit. Like, of course, playing comedic clips in class is probably something that students would always much prefer to the laborious traditional sort of lecture, but. But Louis has this sort of unique way of talking about the human condition that is not only funny but true. You might say it's funny because it's true, and that really interested me more than anything. It was like, well, why is this funny? And I started thinking about laughter as some sort of indication of spiritual enlightenment, and I thought about all these laughing yogis and the laughing Buddha, and that sort of started me on this path of looking into Buddhism and comedy. So this talk I gave was sort of my findings, after the fact, after having delved down that rabbit hole and done some academic work, and then did a lot of watching of Louis and other comedians like Andy Kaufman.
Oh yeah, sure. He would just
him.
Disappear into characters.
Yeah, I mean he's not traditionally a dark comedian, but he's subversive in that he challenges notions about what's real, what's not real, and that fits with sort of the thesis that I was spinning. And we also looked at Tig Notaro. Do you know her?
Sure.
She made headlines when she used the comedic stage to process her cancer and the death of her mother, and so different types of comedians, I think, using real life truths in a comedic context for edification, for therapy, essentially.
Well, I mean, effective comedy is all about being vulnerable, and to expose your less noble side.
Yeah.
So that would make sense for illuminating suffering as a noble truth. I definitely get that.
Yeah, they're different. What I found when I looked into it were there were these different theories about why we laugh, which is itself funny. There's a whole sort of there's all this scientific literature that I have not yet looked into, which sounds interesting, but when I looked at these traditional theories that largely come from philosophy and psychology, you have Freud, for instance, chiming in with what's called the repression theory or suppression theory. Like, basically, we laugh as a release of sexual bent-up energy. Then there's Aristotle and Plato, who think that we laugh. It's called the superiority theory, and we laugh at the misfortune of others.
Oh, right. Yeah, I was just reading about that.
Really?
Comedy writing secrets. I've been
Laughing
reading up on that to try to polish up my joke-telling game. It's not been successful, but yeah, that was a big one, is to inspire superiority in the audience.
Yeah, and you see it a lot with comics who are self-deprecating, and you laugh at them. And I think all of that plays into dark comedy, but the one that really caught my attention was this fairly abstract one called the incongruency theory. And this comes from the Scottish philosopher Hutchinson. And he said, we just laugh at incongruity. And the traditional example is like a fat clown with a little hat. You know, if you're familiar with the old SNL Chris Farley skits, fat guy in a little jacket. That one. Or
the van down by the river.
Yeah. So that's essentially incongruity, but you can take it into, and I do take it into more metaphysical places. So I was arguing that dark comedy that looks at the harsh realities of life, namely death, right? The reality of death, the reality of old age, the reality of sickness, all the hallmarks of the human condition. Comedy that addresses that is funny because it's incongruent with our mind's eye, our interior idealization of ourselves. You know, this idea that I'm never, or this feeling really that I'm never going to die. You know, like intellectually I know that I could be a fatality statistic, but I don't really feel that, you know, like, and, you know, just idealized notions about life in general, like the way the world should be, right? Like there's a certain expectation of the world that I have that is not necessarily realistic, right? Like I'm surprised when my car gets dented, or you know, my pants wear out, like,
or you step into the mud puddle.
Yeah. You know, like realism is entropy. Things fall apart, things end, things start, and Buddhists talk about that. They say everything is in a state of change, and part of the Four Noble Truths is that they identify clinging to these unreal notions, these notions of permanence, as a cause of our own suffering. You know, because we're constantly disappointed.
We're like, don't change, don't change.
And that sounds ridiculous, but it is how we oftentimes operate in the world. You know, I mean, Louis at one of his shows at the Beacon Theater opens with this joke where he says something like, you know, there are 2,000 people out there. You know, statistically, one of you is probably going to die before Christmas and have a shitty death and screw your family's Christmas up. And everybody's laughing because they don't think it's going to be them, because they have this idealized notion of themselves and the way the world should be, and that's not supposed to happen.
It's so true.
You know.
Oh, but to get back to incongruence, right? It reminds me of one of my favorite Henny Youngman jokes, because he was famous for the one-liners.
Yeah.
But my favorite joke of his is kind of a long-form joke. I'm going to butcher this, but I'm going to try anyway.
Do it.
There was a woman in a hotel room. She checked in. She sits down on the bed. A train goes by outside. It shakes the room so bad she falls out of bed. She's kind of upset, but she's fine. She sits back down. A couple minutes later, another train comes by outside. It shakes the room. She falls out of bed. She calls the manager, says, "Hey, trains keep coming by and shaking me and I'm falling out of bed." The manager says, "No one has ever complained about this before. I really would need to see it for myself." She says, "Come on up to my room." So he comes in, they're sitting down on the bed together. Her husband comes out of the bathroom, and the manager turns and says, "I know you'll never believe me, but we're waiting for a train." I love that joke.
That's good.
Because it almost false telegraphs the twist, and then
that's funny. It kind of reminds me of something that happened last night. Right before we got started, I had this idea to maybe do what's called laughing yoga before we got started. And in order to, you know, part of the premise of laughing yoga is it's not about the quality of the jokes, it's just about laughing. And sometimes you have to force it. Right? So the joke is there just to sort of like give you a trigger, and then you really kind of have to force yourself. But once you start laughing with a group of people, it becomes contagious. And then you get this hormonal shift and you kind of get high. So laughing yoga is about like natural highs. And I thought that would be a nice way to start. But I don't know any like quick one-liner jokes, or I don't know any jokes really. Like, I can be funny, but I can't tell jokes. So it just so happened there was like the perfect person to come up and save the day. He was wearing a Mr. Potato Head shirt. And somebody told me, ask him to tell a joke. So I just called him up. He totally owned the mic. He told like 3 awesome, terrible jokes. And everybody was laughing. And it was perfect.
And then it started.
I got my audience stoned right before the lecture.
It started to ripple, right? Everyone.
Yeah.
People would laugh. Other people would laugh.
Yeah.
Look back, like that. Why are you laughing? Ha 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 ha. Kind of moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the idea. So it started with this guy in India who just had this intuition that might be a nice way to start your day. Put you on this sort of happy track in the morning.
That sounds really reasonable.
Yeah.
I mean, that's better than listening to crickets.
It actually even goes deeper. I talked to a practitioner of laughing yoga once, and she told me at the more advanced levels, it actually starts to look like dark comedy, because what they do is they have a circle of people, and they ask you to think of a memory of something you regret, something painful, something that is harming you, because it's maybe weighing on your conscience. So it gets quite serious. They ask you to articulate it to the group, and first you laugh at it, and then the group laughs at it.
Whoa.
Yeah, and
wow.
We did this in my new school class one day, and it was amazing. I mean, I had students talking about really intense childhood memories, and we would laugh at it, and they would start to cry, and it was this cathartic experience. It was really profound. So the long and the short of it is, I think like comedy is an extremely powerful vehicle for call it spiritual evolution, call it just well-being or whatever, but it's not just entertainment.
That's a good parallel for psychedelics, right?
Yeah.
Because it seems like a lot of people have this idea that it's like this magic pill that'll fix everything. And then they're pretty shocked when it's not. Oh no, I have to do work?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and comedy's the same way, right? Because if you really dig in and experience it, you can find truth.
Yeah.
And if you don't do that, you can laugh, but you don't get the full experience.
Yeah.
I mean, at least for really good comedy.
Yeah. I actually had when you were segueing into psychedelics, I thought of something. I don't know. Nitrous oxide is not as, I don't know. Is that a psychedelic? Would you categorize? It's not really.
Probably not. No. But
I was not. I was always very afraid of nitrous growing up. I think there might have been. I'm at the tail end of Gen X, and we grew up with the specter of AIDS and Nancy Reagan telling us not to do drugs.
So I remember that.
We're like this generation that's just been like completely stigmatized. And anyway, I didn't try nitrous oxide really until last year. And I was out in San Francisco, and I was going to some shows. I was seeing the Chris Robinson Brotherhood at the Warfield with my buddy Eric Davis, and who's a total professional psychonaut. And we were doing window pane LSD, and it was a magical night. It wasn't the Warfield. I'm sorry. It was what's the other big theater? The Fillmore, which is like the cathedral to rock and roll. I mean, all the Dead used to play there. So it's got this long history, and it was just a wonderful weekend. And one night we came home after we went to multiple shows, and he suggested we try nitrous oxide, and he was keen to do it on the acid, and I said, all right, let's try it.
To get that kind of pull in kind of feel, yeah.
So this is my first time doing it, right? And like anytime you do something for the first time, it's always awkward. You're always like, well, I'm not really sure how to do this, And there's always that like feeling it's not going to work, like maybe I'm going to be the one person who's like completely immune to this. And I hadn't had that feeling in so long, it was like being a kid again or something, getting stoned for the first time. Like, is it working? I don't know. So I inhale And the first thing, like I was silent, and then I just laughed. It was like this it was like the biggest laugh I've ever had. And I was laughing at life. Like it was this existential, like primordial laugh. It was like in a matter of seconds, I just had this sort of insight into the comedy that life is, you know? And I let out this laugh, and it was deafening. You know, Eric just looked at me like, wow, like that. I've never heard anybody laugh like that before.
That reminds me of, to go back to Louis C.K.
Yeah.
He said in an interview once, he told some joke and didn't get a reaction, and he said, well, you know, comedy minus time equals tragedy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Put a little twist on that quote.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody actually mentioned that last night. I think it was the opposite. It was like comedy equals tragedy plus time.
Yeah. Right, yeah. He was twisting that for effect because his joke didn't hit. He's like, see, it's a tragedy because my joke didn't hit.
I guess, yeah. But, you know, I mean, I think that's the reason that's true is because once time elapses after the tragedy, it becomes... It no longer seems real anymore, you know? And then we can laugh at it as entertainment.
Hopefully. Oh, man. I'm not sure where to segue from this.
I had someone ask me last night a very serious question about suicide. She is a...
That's a good segue, kids. Whenever you start talking about laughter too much and not sure where to go, suicide is the next jump. Ha ha ha! Suicide, or cancer, or 9/11.
That all came up. I mean, that's the dark comedy. That's the content. You know, that's the subject matter. And you know, this woman asked me last night, "Do you think there's a role for comedy in my profession?" Her profession being she helps suicidal people. She's the person you know get at the other end of the phone when you dial the 1-800.
Oh, sure.
Off myself maybe. And I said definitely. The problem is though that like with a joke it could go either way. And when you're talking to somebody on the phone, you can't really gauge
like body language and context.
You can't read the person, so you can't construct a clever joke that would work for that person, right? Because it has to be specific to that person, you know? So, Aristotle talked about like wit as a virtue. And I think what he meant was something like this, like being able to insert a witty joke at just the right time to avoid something bad happening, like somebody killing themselves or maybe a fight breaking out. But in order to do that, you really need to have some, information that I think you only get from being in person with the other person, and you wouldn't be able to do that on the phone. So the long and short of it is don't make jokes, on the suicide line. But I think it would work if you could get more information about the person, and
right. Well, I mean, if you take someone's tragedy and you make a little twist of it and you make it funny, I imagine it's easier to work with, to do something with, rather than this awesome, terrible thing that seems really close. If you can twist it and make it funny, then it's a little further away, so you can dissect it, and maybe dig in, and then, or maybe if you're like having an acid trip, you can even dig down to the roots and disassemble the part of your personality that is responsible for that.
I wonder, do they have helplines for acid trips anywhere?
Oh, I'm sure they do.
Right?
I'm sure they do, and then they're probably ridiculous.
Like just for acid or psychedelics in general, I think that would be interesting. I'd love to hear some of those phone calls.
Because I saw this kooky website that's like, are you addicted to LSD? And I'm like, really? Is that a thing? And then, of course, on their comments, there were no comments because what's anyone going to say?
Yeah.
I'm a very irresponsible person.
Yeah.
No.
But I want the helpline that's not like, oh, are you addicted? It's more like, okay, I'm just going to help you out, you know? Like, see, everybody has a bad trip every once in a while, and, you know.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The darkness just kind of gets to be overwhelming or overbearing.
The Zendo version, you know Zendo? Oh, you don't know Zendo? Harm reduction?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
They're the guys at Burning Man, you know, that you go see when things are turning bad. And actually, not just Burning Man, a lot of festivals. I mean, they're doing really good work. I think it's really important, actually.
Have you had some trips that went bad?
Sure. But I don't see them as bad. You know, Neil Goldsmith, I think, has, you know, he as I recall from one of his talks, he said something like, you know, there are no bad trips, they're just challenging trips, and I believe that.
I agree that too. Yeah.
Yeah, like I may not be having a good time, but the next day I feel therapized. You know, I feel like I worked through something, and I really value that. That was also part of the comedy talk, was like how we misunderstand pain and suffering. Like, pain and suffering can bring us to really good places. So, you know, a painful, you know, scary acid trip, you know, in the moment might be scary, but after you work through all that, after you have that cathartic experience or that confrontation with your demons, you're the better for it.
Now that we're on the subject of demons and pain and acid trips, I feel some great stories coming, but you're going to have to wait until after this little tiny break. All right, we're back. So I predict some spooky stories coming with demons and darkness. Isn't that what all the kids like? Yeah.
I don't know if I have any really good scary stories. Let's see. I don't know. It's funny. Like, you know, what is it to be afraid, really? Right? I mean,
I had one trip fairly recently that started off pretty dark.
Yeah.
Where I just kept noticing these tics in my behavior. And then when I'm alone and I'm doing it therapeutically, I've got kind of like this other voice. Whether that would be like the therapist's voice or like the shaman's suggestion or whatever. But it's like digging into my subconscious to find answers for things. But this voice became really critical. And not like fun critical or like constructive critical, but just like brutally mean to me. And it wouldn't shut off, and I couldn't block it out. And I'm like, all right, I guess I gotta dig into this and see if, you know, what you're talking about has some merit. And it did, which is what turned the trip around and made it great.
You started listening.
I started finding these weird things from childhood, just odd little memories that had nuggets of, hey, this is why you do this annoying thing that you do. And, oh, and then that voice suddenly became warm and nurturing rather than critical and mean.
Right. Yeah, I think that's how you get through the bad trip, is you engage it, right? You don't run away from it.
But I mean, I've read people's trip reports online where it's like these demon frogs attack and all this stuff happens. I've never had anything like that happen to me. I mean, I've had some really visual, like, reality drops out. Yeah. Like, fully immersed trips, and I've never had anything where, like, demons attacked me. Like, that just never popped into my experience.
Yeah, I can't say that I have. I've had what you were describing, you know, that sort of critical inner voice, and but I think whether it's demons or that critical inner voice, like, I think the worst thing you can do is run away, and this is exactly why Timothy Leary, Richard Alpert really were turned on, pardon the pun, but turned on by the Tibetan Book of the Dead. You know, the Tibetan Book of the Dead is all about navigating Buddhist purgatory, the in-between state, the Bardo state. And what they say is, if you know the Tibetan Book of the Dead, if you go into it knowing what to expect, which is to say, you go into it knowing that, like, demons are waiting for you, if you understand that those demons are a manifestation of your conscience and are coming from you, then you won't make the mistake of running away from them. You'll engage them. You'll try to be fearless in the face of fear. And by doing that, you can change the outcome of your next rebirth. So they took this book, which really just is a roadmap, and tweaked it for psychedelic use. And people were buying it and using it actively for avoiding the bad trip. That's sort of what it was, like a sort of rescue book, like how to avoid the scary bad trip.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Man, now I almost wish that I've had a scary bad trip just for reference. Yeah, just so I can say, this is the problem, and now I can dig in and find this solution. Now I don't know. Now I feel like I'm a little bit hungry for a bad trip. Just a little bit, kids. Wow.
I started doing psychedelics in college, and then when I became a Buddhist, I stopped.
Right.
Buddhism is at least in the 21st century American version of it. There is not a lot of tolerance for serious Buddhist practice in any kind of so-called intoxicant. And the presupposition or the assumption is that it is diluting your mind and you want clarity in your mind. Now I take issue with that, and I have my own sort of compatibilist theory that brings psychedelics and Buddhism together. But when I just become a Buddhist, I stopped doing psychedelics, and I didn't do them for many years. And then I went to graduate school, and I started having kids, and just wasn't. I didn't have the bandwidth. I didn't have the interest. But in the back of my head, it was lurking. It was like, maybe I'll go back to that someday. And then when I finished dissertation, I had a little extra time, and somebody had some mushrooms, and I bought them, and I put them in the freezer, and I was like, good to have them, And one night, I just ate them. My family was in the other room, right?
Nice.
And this is like the first mistake you can make for ushering in a bad trip, is to underestimate the substance that you are taking.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And I totally did that. I was like, make me... Because it's been years. I didn't remember. I blocked out, I think, the negative part of tripping. And so I ate these mushrooms, and next thing you know, I'm on this roller coaster ride. And I think part of what made it challenging was the fact that my family was in the next room. And there was that... I hadn't done this since having had kids, hadn't done this since having gotten married. So all of that, all of that repressed psychology that I hadn't engaged in better part of a decade came up. And it was intense. And I was on the ground, wrestling with that inner voice, that critical inner voice.
What does your critical inner voice say?
I think it was like, you're not a good dad, you're not a good graduate student, that kind of stuff. And but for me, music has always been integral to the psychedelic experience. It's been, in some ways, I guess, like a lifeline, right? And in that moment, I was drowning in this sea of self-criticism, and I knew what I needed, and I needed music to pull me out. And so I'm a big Grateful Dead fan, so I turned on some Grateful Dead, and I think that's, mentioning the type of music is important, because it's improvisation. And it kind of goes all over the place, but it always takes you home again. It's like jazz improvisation. Like, it'll go off into this other, melody or something, but then it will always come back to the recognizable melody of the song. And so there's this feeling of being lost and coming home again. And the music did that for me, and it saved me. And then I had at least some footing to confront those inner voices. And it was extremely therapeutic, and the next morning I was a different person. I didn't tell my wife what I had done, but she noticed it immediately. She's like, there's something just totally different about you. The next 2 weeks, I did things differently, you know, and I put my life actually on a different track. And I think that was a very productive bad trip. I don't know. I don't want to call it a bad trip. It was certainly challenging.
That sounds like a great trip.
Right. Yeah.
That kind of reminds me of my first ayahuasca experience.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you know, I didn't know what to expect at the time, even though I had tripped before. Everyone's like, oh, it's so different, and blah, blah, blah. So I thought, ooh, something different. And, you know, at the time, I was experiencing a lot of anxiety about where am I going with my life? What am I doing? That's why I felt the call. Like, you need something that hits a little harder, like, to go a little deeper.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you know, what are you doing with this life? Like, it's this wonderful gift, and you're just kind of, like, just pissing it away.
Yeah.
At least that's the way I felt.
Yeah.
And then on this trip, it's like the textbook ayahuasca mystical experience. Like, the lady shows up and says, hey, I'm going to tell you some stuff, and it's going to suck, but you're going to have to listen up. And it's like, all right, you know, and the background fades out, and it's like this other world. And it was really a terrific experience. But the strangest part for me was when she took me to this hall of masks. There were these masks like on this wall, but it wasn't really a wall. It's hard to describe, but in the psychedelic space, it's there and not there. And then she's like, try them on, you know? And then each mask I tried on, it felt like, I don't know if it felt like a past life or a different life or a different person.
Yeah.
But I'd put on the mask and I'd go to like somebody's like dresser, like their bureau and their photos and looking in the mirror and like the things that are important to this person. And then I started to think thoughts like I was this other person.
Wow.
And they're different people from different time periods and different cultures, and their language was going in my head, and I don't understand these languages, you know, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And she's like, all right, try the next one, you know, and then I tried on a bunch of masks, and she's like, what do they all have in common? And I thought about it, and it was a really hard question. I'm like, the only thing they all have in common is the mask. Like, she's like, that's your answer. Like, that's what you're looking for. And it took me a while to really integrate what that was all about, you know, like, but it got me on the idea of, oh, you know, my way of relating to the world is just an arbitrary thing that I crafted myself over time and just stopped paying attention to. And I'm like, oh, that's true for everyone.
Yeah.
Whoa, and I can change it to whatever I want?
Yeah.
Like, people get stuck in this idea that their personalities are set in stone and that their choices are all predetermined, but you can change yourself into whatever you want at any moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was an eye-opening thing for me because I had all these anxieties about all these things I wanted to try and didn't know how to do. I thought, you know what? I'm just going to start doing them, and if the anxiety gets too much, I'll have a trip just to deal with that particular anxiety.
Yeah.
Like after one of the Horizons events, the after party. I don't like tripping in public that much, but in this case, you know, I'm like, you know what? This social anxiety thing is really crippling me. I'm just going to take mushrooms, not tell anybody, be around like 200 people, and just talk.
Was this the conference or the after party?
No, the after party. No, the conference I probably would have gotten kicked out.
Yeah.
And there was one moment, though, at this after party that was...
Was this the last Horizons?
I think it was the last one.
Yeah.
But one do-or-die moment for me was there were different people that were like, hey, you know, people will offer you pot. And then I didn't have any pot. I was just mushroom. And I thought, yeah, a little cannabis will loosen me up, make me feel good. So this guy, you know, a one-hitter, and I puffed it. Most powerful cannabis I've ever had in my life. I don't know what strain this was, but it just knocked me on the floor. Like, I was walking and just lost control of my body and fell on the ground. And of course, when you're at a post-drug event convention, oh my God, what's he on? Is he okay? Is he going to die? And hearing, you know, 200 voices going, oh my God, is that guy okay?
Yeah.
That was quite a challenge for my social anxiety because I felt embarrassed and ashamed that I was drawing all this attention to myself. And then it became really funny.
Right.
Like, I'm doing this in public.
You could laugh at it.
Yeah. As soon as I gained control of my limbs again, I was able to laugh at it. But lesson learned, don't smoke strange people's pot at parties.
Yeah. No, I've fallen down before. I know how that feels.
I mean, falling down is one thing. When your legs just stop working and your arms stop working, you just wham hit the ground. For me, that was a first, and it was pretty spooky.
Did you work through the social anxiety?
Oh, yeah. It's gone.
It's gone now.
It's permanently gone. That's one weird thing that a lot of people, and one of my trepidations, because a lot of the conversation now is about the research and the therapeutic application, and the only word I ever hear is treatment. I never hear cure. And then my own experience is it's been cure. I mean, nothing in the way of treatment for anything. And I thought, is the focus right? Are people zooming in on the real power of this stuff? To cure like crippling personality problems and neuroses permanently. I mean, to me, that's a terrific benefit for something like that.
Well, I think they need longitudinal studies to determine that. But that is one of the things that, at least in some of the research studies they've been pushing, is that there isn't this, what do they call it, recidivism, when people like backslide and go back to it, whatever it may be. I saw an interesting study that was all about, it was done in the UK. It was psychedelics as a catalyst for personality change and political affiliation. And I thought this was really interesting because historically, I think since acid was adopted by the counterculture, there's been this intuition that if we can get enough people to try it, then the world would be a better place. Nick Sands, who just passed away, and Tim Scully set out to do just that with Orange Sunshine, and according to what I've read, distributed like 4 million tablets. Wow. So you might say they did that was a pretty good attempt, and maybe they did make the world a somewhat better place.
Well, I mean, we've got organic food and yoga studios and all kinds of stuff we didn't even have 30 years ago.
That's right.
So, for all the negative people could say about that kind of aggressive approach, it did have benefits for us.
I agree.
There's a strong environmental movement now that just didn't really exist. Yeah,
I think it's hard to see nowadays with Trumpzilla, in the White House, but that's sort of getting to where what I've been thinking about. And last year, my friend Danny Miller, who used to run the Brooklyn's
I know Danny.
Psychedelic Society, we had this political conversation where I was saying Bernie is my candidate, and he was saying no, Bernie's unelectable. I love him, but you got to go with Hillary. She's the electable one, even if she's not your favorite. And I'm like, well, how do we make her my favorite? Like, what do we do? Like, how can we? And we both decided that maybe the problem was that she seemed inauthentic, right? I mean, I think that was kind of a general sort of feeling about her, was that she wasn't trustworthy, that she was duplicitous in some way, she was hiding something, and that's why the email thing was so powerful, right?
I mean, the whole speaking fee thing is really that's what gives her the bad rep, because that's actually a bad thing that she does. Supposedly trying to reel in these bad people who give you ridiculous sums of money afterward. I could see the problem in that.
I mean, not taking their money would also be a good idea. Our solution to the problem was we were going to dose her. We thought that would be the...
Whoa.
So we got it into our heads that the most patriotic thing we could do with our lives was get to Hillary. And this is not, I think Jefferson Airplane had a plan, the band Jefferson Airplane, they had a plan to also dose the president at one point.
Whoa.
Or a political candidate.
And that was what, Johnson, right?
It must have been, right?
Or maybe it was Nixon.
God knows. But okay, so there you go. So this is sort of where we're going with this, is that, obviously Hillary didn't win. Trump won, and I revisited the conversation with Danny. I was like, well, would it work with Trump? And I'm like, I don't think so. We're dealing with a completely different person here. I think we talked about this maybe.
The
Charles Manson effect.
Oh, right.
Like, if we were to dose Trump, I think it would be worse. It would
amplify what he already brings in.
His psychosis, like in the case of Charles Manson, who, was there in the hate, going to the same parties as the Grateful Dead, and somehow went this way when everybody was going peace, love, and and forgiveness, he was going on this psychotic, helter-skelter path. So, if it were Nixon, I think you would see a Charles Manson sort of scenario. Johnson, maybe not. Johnson's a little bit more like in the Hillary camp.
Well, Nixon, you might have had a chance if you got him in a national park.
You think so?
Yeah. Well, didn't he set that up, the national park system?
You think he'd just go like total
he had
peacenik?
Some good little seed in the back of his whatever, that something in his personality wasn't allowing to blossom. So Nixon might have actually had a good benefit if he tripped.
We'd have to have the right setting.
In the forest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wouldn't that have been weird?
That would be weird.
Sorry,
but maybe you're on.
but
Maybe you're onto something, because setting is so important, right? I mean, I think you have set and setting, and that largely determines the nature of your psychedelic experience.
Well, it's interesting because I know a person who used to be one of Trump's assistants. Like back in the day, she was like his assistant, right? And she said when you get people away from him, when you get cameras off, he's one of the sweetest, nicest, funnest people to talk to. Yeah. And then I saw some, I think it was a podcast, I forget which comedian it was, maybe it was Norm Macdonald, who said the same thing.
Yeah.
Like when you get all the BS away from him, he's a really interesting character.
Yeah.
But then when that pressure to perform just turns him into a weird monster.
The problem, I can totally see that. And I tried to do that with him for a while. Like, I tried to cognitively reframe him. And do you remember Archie Bunker?
Sure.
Bunker?
No, I've been watching a lot of All in the
Have
Family
you?
reruns lately. I don't know why, but yeah.
It's funny you say that, because I started to do it as well. So it was on my mind. It was on my mind. And I was like, all right, I get it. Like, Archie is a terrible person, but there's something adorable about him. There's something, he's got a heart underneath.
He's got that nugget of something that could blossom in the right conditions.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, Trump is my Archie Bunker. That's how I'm going to cognitively reframe him. I'm just going to think of him as Archie Bunker. But the problem is, being president means you have all these people around you putting pressure on you all the time.
Right.
So
the cameras are always there.
Yeah, it's probably just not the best job for him, because it brings out the worst in him.
But one idea that's been floating around is that we needed someone crazy to make us pay attention to the steering wheel on the boat.
I agree.
And having someone like that who is, at least gives everyone the impression that he's a monster, has made almost everyone pay attention. Yeah. I don't know if people are paying attention in necessarily a healthy, constructive way on any side of the issue. Yeah. But it is interesting that everyone's engaging and paying attention.
I totally agree with you. And there's this idea of skillful means in Buddhism, where an enlightened Buddha will do anything to get you enlightened. And by anything, I mean tailoring your life, or tailoring the teaching according to what you need at that moment. And sometimes what you need at that moment is not, a hug, but a slap in the face.
Sometimes. Yeah. Or even a good stiff punch. Yeah. It really does wonders for a person.
So, there's an argument that Trump is Buddha, and he's invoking skillful means to get us to, start voting and take action and be a part of democracy, because we've been so apathetic. It's pathetic.
There's a good friend of mine who, really sweet, wonderful person, but he, in the past, tended to say whatever the most sensitive thing that somebody in the room would be feeling at the moment, he would say it in a brash way to get everyone upset. And it was unintentional. Right. But he just had this weird subconscious way of zooming in on someone's darkest insecurity.
Yeah, and just calling it out.
And then make the room erupt. And then he's like, why is everyone upset? What's happening? And I don't know where I was going with that. So this is a good time to take a break. We'll see you guys in a minute. Welcome back, kids. Off camera we were just talking about bullying, and this seems like a pretty good topic. What were you saying? Bullying is...
I feel like we've gotten better about getting rid of bullies. Like, they're all these... I know a bit about this just because I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, 2 girls, and we just went through the process of applying for middle school in New York City, which is like applying for college. you have to go on tours.
Yes.
You have to do your homework and, really research the schools. I mean, I think now so more than ever, because there are a lot of great schools. And this is sort of what I'm getting at, is that at least in New York City, there are a lot of people interested in making schools work. And one of the facets of making a school work is getting rid of bullies, or providing programs so that people don't become bullies, or people who are being bullies can find an outlet to go to and find help. So I'm optimistic that our experience growing up is different now. I think that's true. But I'm constantly afraid for my daughter, because I shouldn't be, but she's different from the other kids. Like last night, they had a school dance. This is 5th grade, right? So they've never done this before. The school's never done this before. This is the first time they did it, and she's a musician. She likes to play guitar. She's an athlete, and we listen to the same music. It's not a coincidence, but she genuinely likes it. I mean, there is there are only certain kinds of records in the house, so the choices are limited. But she genuinely, we both share that passion. And last night she went to this dance, and I said, "Well, how was it?" She's like, "It's really fun. I really enjoyed myself, but I didn't know any of the songs." And everybody seemed to know the words to a lot of them, and that was kind of peculiar, And I was like, "Well, yeah, we don't listen to the radio, and we don't listen to pop, and."
Well, that happened to me as a kid too, because my mother's friend gave me a bunch of records when she switched to CD, and I got a job mowing lawns, and I bought a record player. So I was listening to a lot of different music than the other kids were, and I'd say, "Hey guys, come over, let's listen to records together." And I had a few music kids that would come by and pop it on. They're always like, "Wow, what is this? Is that an electric violin? Like, what is that?" It was really fun, because they were expecting kind of stuff, or none of that. So that was really fun. You get the kids over, and you're playing Nintendo and putting on some records.
Yeah, totally. But I worry for a little bit, because that makes her unique, which is lovely, and she's different. But that is what bullies hone in on. They, bullies sort of seek out the freaks and the weirdos and take advantage of their singularity and intimidate them for their own.
Has she had a problem with this?
Never. She's never had a problem. That's my point. Like, I keep anticipating this problem that doesn't seem to exist. But I think that's also
that she's a girl. Because I know the way that girls and boys bully each other is a little
different. Yeah.
Like,
well, no, I'm anticipating the girl meanness, like the
weird psychological torture that they tend to do.
Yeah. That's the one I'm afraid for, because she's an athlete too. Like, she's a tomboy, So she doesn't. I've never seen her in a dress. I haven't seen her in a dress in like 5 years. So anyway, I think I'm an optimist. I like to think that things are getting better, and raising a kid in New York City for somebody like me is it's hard to imagine being someplace else. I'm very transparent about my drug use, and I talk to my kids about it, and they're aware of it. That's going to become a little bit more challenging, I think, when drugs become a part of their life.
Sure.
But so far, so good. We're very honest and open, and it seems to be working out. But again, we're in New York City. We're in Brooklyn, and I'm not unusual here, but someplace else I would be, and I might be bullied by other parents.
You mean like rural Alabama or something?
I don't know. Maybe just even the suburbs of Westchester County, where I grew up. Like, there's a way in which parents and adults bully each other. They don't necessarily punch one another, but they do other things, psychological bullying, or just, people are uncomfortable with difference. and you could argue that maybe there's some evolutionary rationale for that.
I mean, I found in the past with people who felt that way, and then they kind of came around.
Yes.
For them, it was always a deep dissatisfaction with how boring and mundane their lives are. That's not a blanket statement. I mean, I'm sure there are exceptions, but the people I've actually spoken to who used to be that way, universally, that's been I was just really jealous that you could be so free and have fun, and I had to do this thing, and then I realized, oh, I don't have to do that thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I can be free and have fun too.
Yeah.
And when they have that aha light bulb moment, life changes.
Yeah, and to bring psychedelics back into it, like oftentimes psychedelics, whether it's a good trip or a bad trip, most likely a quote-unquote bad trip, that can be the catalyst for that kind of transformation and break through that wall and set somebody free so that they can engage their authentic self.
That's like I've been seeing like articles in, I don't know, Vice and some other places where they're like, oh, now all these people are going to the jungle and it's just become a tourist thing to take ayahuasca and blah, blah, blah. And soccer moms and bros and all that. And I think if a soccer mom wants to talk to ayahuasca and change her life, yes, please. Yeah. Yes, please. If some, bro dude, mall cop wants to go to Peru and change his life, yes, do that. Then we'll have less Archie Bunkers in the world. Like that's you get that inspiration. I don't see why we should discourage people from doing that.
Yeah, it's kind of a psychedelic bullying in a way, right?
It is. It really is. There is a strange elitism in the scene for sure, and it's multi-tiered, which is what really throws me off. Yeah, because you get like I understand kind of like the psychedelic bro perspective. Like I go to the gym and I've got a career and I'm doing this thing that I really want to do, and why is everybody so lazy? Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. I didn't understand that for a long time, and now I get it. Yeah, now I go to the gym and and I'm trying to build stuff up, and I get that because for me it is frustrating to watch people just kind of spin their gears, unhappy, not doing what they want with their lives. To me, that seems completely insane. Yeah, like you have all this power and magic and you can do whatever you want, and you choose to not do what makes you happy. Obviously there's a perspective of privilege in that. Some people just don't have a choice. You're chained to a desk in some factory somewhere and you're not allowed to leave. Sure, I get that. But for everyone else in the world, I don't understand the excuse. To me but I made that same excuse myself for a long time. Like, I just can't do this thing because it's just not for me or whatever, which is completely ridiculous. Yes, yeah.
But it may be ridiculous, but, the experience of it is not.
And then you've got another tier of elitism where it's like the psychonaut dudes. And they talk to aliens and do all this conspiracy theory stuff, and I don't understand any of that. To me, that sounds like a crazy way to do it. And most of those folks seem like they've got real issues. And like what you were saying about Charles Manson, instead of digging into their problem and solving it, they're just heightening what they bring in. And what they bring in is nuts, and then it makes it worse. And like a lot of these meetups and conferences, I meet people like that. And the Earth's flat, and ooh. And Obama's a lizard person from the 8th dimension, and here to, no, that's one thing that does frighten me about our consciousness revolution. The outliers and the third tier of elitism that I've noticed are like the spirit dudes. Hey man, I'm so balanced and even and perfect and pure. And I'm like, no, you're not. That's just the mask you're wearing to try to impress people. Like, don't do that. It's gross. You stub your toe and go, fuck, I hit my toe, just like everybody else does. Like,
I mean, I think you can look at religious history as for a good kind of comparison, because a lot of religions start off with these small sort of mystical, a kind of cult not in the derogatory sense, like a group of people who had a transformative experience and from that radically changed their life and started doing things differently. And then you have people who are then sort of reifying that and a whole clinging to it in this way, and they build a whole institution around it, and they become fundamentalist about that one particular idea or whatever, and then the whole thing kind of goes wrong. And
right, because then they want to isolate the people who aren't in.
Yeah.
And then you have to have like layers of in, and
Yeah.
then like gates and barriers blocking the people at the top from everybody else.
Yeah.
And then it becomes just hierarchical nonsense.
Right.
And then they build these ridiculous myths around it to try to isolate everyone from
That's
the truth.
right.
Yeah.
Totally. This is, I said this, I believe in compatibilism between psychedelics and Buddhism, and I think this is exactly where Buddhism is useful, in that, you can have these really transformative psychedelic experiences, but then how do you integrate that into your life? How do you work with that outside of the psychedelic experience? How do you realize some of the insights that you had in your mundane day-to-day life? And I think Buddhist meditation is really good for that.
Well,
and vice versa. Like you can use psychedelics to integrate some of your Buddhism.
Oh, sure.
Like it's funny how, because a lot of Buddhists are, even though they may be intolerant of psychedelic use in conjunction with Buddhism, there's an inordinate amount of Buddhists who have done psychedelics, right? So maybe like 5% of the nation has tried acid, but like 90% of American Buddhists have.
Right.
And so the story, the traditional line, and people love to point to Ram Dass as sort of the model for this, like Ram Dass supposedly supposedly he was one of the progenitors of like the counterculture and acid as a kind of tool for realization. Then he goes to India and he becomes a Hindu, and as the story goes, trades his acid for yoga. I don't think it's so clean cut, but people love that story because it resonates with this idea that like acid can't, or psychedelics can't take you all the way to enlightenment. They can open a door and you can step through that gateway, but then you have to do the hard work of like meditating and doing it without substances.
Well, daily practice.
Daily practice, yeah.
Like that's with this whole blog and podcast and all that. Like the thing I'm trying to hit home for everybody is daily practice is the key.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable with your body and you're exercising, you're healthier. You've got more energy. You can do more with your life.
Yeah.
So it's this, and they're like, God, I'm so tired. I can't do anything. You're like, hey man, I'm ready for the next thing.
Yeah.
And then being disciplined about your time. Like wasn't it Benjamin Franklin that said, kill at least 3 frogs before lunch. You know what I mean? Like those really unpleasant tasks that you don't want to do. Knock those out first, and the rest of your day is a breeze. You get to do whatever you want.
Get your yoga done and
And then like meditation, you once you put in those reps, just like going to the gym, you get so used to talking to your subconscious. Psychedelics are easy. That's no problem.
Yeah, I mean, just the word actually in Tibetan for meditation is habituation. So you can think of practice as just you're building muscles, mental muscles, emotional muscles. You're habituating yourself to a different way of being. So I'm all for that. Like psychedelics open a door, and meditation can carry you. But I also think, well, before I get to that, there are also those who would say, listen to the plants. Like, don't look to any isms, don't look to any religion or organized system of thought. Just listen to the Terence McKenna, right? Like that's that's a big, and I see that too. Like I totally value that, and my Buddhism is an unconventional Buddhism, so I wouldn't even categorize it as an ism. But those are sort of the poles, right? You have somebody over here saying just listen to the plants, and you have somebody over here saying plants are fine, but leave them behind, and only meditation will take you all the way. And I think both are valid. Listen to the plants and then go meditate. Meditate and then go do psychedelics. And that looks like a variety of different things, and I feel like what's so exciting about where we are now is we're finally in a place where we can actually start to define what that looks like. Like we can, Alan Badiner is a good friend of mine, and he was the editor of this book, Zigzag Zen.
That sounds really familiar to me.
It's a classic book, and for years it was the only book out there on Buddhism and psychedelics. And I saw him recently, and he was talking about this, some zigzag Zen events he's been doing, and sort of, in his words, taking it to the next level. And I said, well, once you take it to that level, I think the next level after that is actually going and doing retreats and starting to really articulate what this looks like. How do we combine Buddhism and psychedelics very specifically, meaning what are the tantric meditations that might be appropriate for a psychedelic experience? So it's not just integrating what you did last night with meditation, it's actually meditating on psychedelics and using Buddhist ritual within the psychedelic experience.
That sounds really fun.
That sounds really interesting to me.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about Tantra, because I think it's kind of... And there are people out there that would argue that Buddhism historically actually made a place for psychedelics. Mike Crowley, I think is his name, has a book sitting on my desk. It's my summer reading, and he makes that argument that actually this is not a new thing.
Talking about like Soma.
I don't know what he's talking about because I haven't read the book. I haven't come across it in my research, but I'm excited to dig in to see what he has to say, because that's an interesting and provocative, perhaps more provocative than what I'm arguing. What I'm arguing is, for something new that we haven't done yet. What he's doing is more difficult in the academic sense, because he's got to find evidence.
Wow. Yeah, that's gonna be hard.
Yeah. So, but I'm totally sympathetic and excited to read his book, and I think a lot of people are. And it's just indicative of, again, this really exciting space that we're in right now, at least for Buddhists like me, who finally feel freed up, and the psychedelic renaissance has a lot to do with this. I came out of the psychedelic closet last year, and that was a real thing. My wife, when I used that phrase with her, she was kind of like, "Do you really think that's the best phrase? Don't you think it's diminishing to how homosexuals and lesbians use that phrase?" And I was like, "No, no, I don't, because I know
it sounds more inviting."
But hey, I know how conflicted I was, and how, I don't mean to take away from that feeling that, the traditional sort of coming out of the closet experience is, but, I never felt totally able to be myself in public, I always felt that if this dirty little secret got out, everybody would reject me. And I think that is probably how anybody who feels like a misfit or a freak feels like, So coming out of the psychedelic closet for me was really about embracing my inner freak and pronouncing it to the world, and just saying, kind of like you with your social anxiety, and just, falling in public and saying, "Here I am, I'm just this guy, and this is what I'm about, and take it or leave it," and for me, doing it in public, and having that experience, which was facilitated, by Lex Pelger and Symposia, and their open mic. That's a very powerful vehicle that they have going.
That's funny, because my coming out experience was at one of the Brooklyn Psychedelic Society meetings, where I just told the story of how I cured my depression. People told me it was a good talk, but I got a little weird at the end. But
weird at the end.
But that was me like, hey, this is a public thing for me now. Yeah. I'm not going to hide it anymore.
Yeah.
Boom, guys.
And did you feel great afterwards?
Oh, terrific. Yeah. But to start with the curing depression story, that was a big deal. But to back up the truck to isms, the way I feel about isms, and like if you have a belief or a system that can help you, I think it's just another tool, like jujitsu. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a wonderful tool for self-development.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the ism, the negative part of the ism, is really just a euphemism or another word for talking about the fundamentalists who have no tolerance for the bullies, right? The people who have no tolerance for the misfits, or the people who are doing things differently, one of these kids is doing their own thing, and they don't like that. So that's, for me, ism is just the sort of more formalized form of that, right? And and in some ways it's the socially sanctioned form of bullyism. But there are good things that come from that institution as well, right? Like, you need an institution to publish books. You need an institution to carry a tradition from one generation to the next. Or maybe you don't. I don't know.
Well, to go back to jiu-jitsu, you don't get better if you don't roll with people and practice.
Yeah, and you need a whatever.
And if you don't do it in a respectful way where you're rolling to help each other, not just
community.
Look how tough I am.
Yeah.
But the community of really coming together.
Yeah.
I think that's why those sorts of tools are really useful. But what you were saying about separating the listen to the plant to my practice.
Yeah.
I had an interesting parallel with that. We talked before about I'm a natural lucid dreamer.
Oh, yeah.
And that I feel that it gave me reps as far as dealing with my subconscious. Like I was able to get in there and dig around long before meditation or long before the psychedelic experience, is because I've always been a lucid dreamer. And for me, the big challenge with that, and I think it was a huge source of a lot of my anxieties, is when you lucid dream, you're in total control. And to be in total control, I think for me it was suffocating my subconscious. Like, hey, I can't give you messages in your dreams. You're still in control.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And I realized I believe it was the mushroom trip when I cured my depression that I had that realization, like, hey, you need to relax in your dreams, let your subconscious talk.
Right.
And if it gets boring or annoying, change the channel or brighten up the background or introduce other characters or whatever. But let your subconscious breathe and talk a little bit. And I think that
makes perfect sense. I mean, it's so wild because if you think about it, like, being a lucid dreamer is like being able to have many of the sort of magical benefits of the psychedelic experience without having to succumb or what's the word? Submit to the psychedelic. Relinquish control, right? But then, so your experience is very different from most people's in the sense...
Well, there was never any trepidation or fear. It's like, as dark or intense or crazy as it would get, I go, this is the lesson. This is what I got to dig through. It was never like, help me, Mom, what am I going to do? Yeah. But it's an interesting parallel for what you're saying about listen to the plant or practice your disciplines, whatever it is. Yeah. And for me, that lucid dreaming experience kind of ironed that out. Like, listen to the plant, but also apply your discipline to it when it makes sense. Yeah. And we'll be right back. This is a good pausing point because I feel more stories coming. Whoop, whoop.
Where did we leave off?
The parallels between lucid dreaming, dealing with the subconscious, and dealing with your isms as far as schools of thought that you partake in.
All right.
I used all the wrong words. Welcome back, kids. No, I really love vocabulary slips. Not to go back to Archie Bunker, but that was one of the keys to the comedy of that character.
I got a way to tie this in.
He's constantly using the wrong words.
That's right.
Which is really funny.
It is funny. Cognitive liberty, right? Cognitive liberty is this phrase that's being thrown around as a kind of human right. We have a human right to alter our consciousness, right? And when I heard this, I got really excited because I did my dissertation on Buddhism and human rights. And what I wanted to do in my dissertation was start from the question, is the Western philosophical tradition of human rights compatible with Tibetan Buddhism of the Dalai Lama? Because the Dalai Lama is out there talking about the Tibet issue and saying that he's a big advocate of the Declaration of Human Rights. But the philosophical underpinnings of that document are very specific, and they come from Kant, they come from Locke, these ideas like inalienable rights, inherent human dignity. These are the sort of foundation of that idea or that document and the human rights movement in general. And it actually is not compatible with Buddhism. Buddhism is highly, at least in the Tibetan tradition, is metaphysically deconstructionist. There's no such thing as an inalienable anything. There's no such thing as an inherent anything. That doesn't mean you can't make the argument for human dignity and rights. It just means you can't make it based on this idea of some intrinsic, absolute metaphysical property. Like, that's just not...
Like, it's not a native state.
Yeah. So that was philosophically interesting to me. But what I found was that at the end of the dissertation, you know, like, how could, you know, where do we go from here, right? Buddhism, I think, has a lot to offer in the way of perspective-taking meditations, compassion-based meditation that we, I think, should integrate into school curricula. So then I started looking at pre-existing human rights curricula and found that there are all these people out there who are working on bringing those kinds of things into grade school for the most part. And they're drawing sometimes on, you know, pop mindfulness kind of meditations, but a lot of it was also using drama games where you're play acting and you're pretending to be another person.
Like improv theater?
Yeah.
Or like role-playing games?
Yeah. And that got me really excited. And then, you know, because I was doing work in the realm of human rights, I remembered one of the articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that we have a right to the full development of the human person. And to me, that was cognitive. That's kind of a form of cognitive liberty in the sense that what does it mean to develop the full potential of the human person, right? And I think psychedelics are a vehicle for fully developing the human person for all the ways that we've been suggesting, you know, in terms of, you know, breaking, you know, through all that maybe mental trauma that is haunting you from the past, or finding your authentic self, or, you know, whatever, however you want to talk about it. It's a cure. It's a psychological cure. You know, if you do the work, it's not, you know, over.
It's not a magic pill.
It's not a magic pill. So anyway, that idea, I think education is so important, and I'm not suggesting that we dose our kids, but talking about psychedelics, normalizing them, you know, making the countercultural history part of the liberal arts education. You know, people don't know about Nick Sand and Tim Scully and what they tried to do with Orange Sunshine. That's important information. It changed America in the ways we discussed before. The 60s had a profound effect on America, and I think, you know, my kids in grade school, they're learning New York State history, and they're learning about the Dutch, and they're learning about the British, and you know, eventually they'll get to more modern history, and when they do, I really hope that there's a place carved out for the countercultural movement and what it did for us. Because I think most people, at least my students that I'm teaching at the college level, know very little about that.
Wow.
You know, and know very little about drugs. We did this, I invited, you know, Lex Pelger.
Sure.
I invited him to be a guest lecturer one day, and this was for a class I do on Buddhism and cognitive science, and we were talking about psychedelics. It's a whole section. And he was supposed to talk about symposia and what they're doing, and it ended up being more about drug awareness and information. Like, just information, like, you should never do this, and if you are thinking about trying this drug, you know, if you're thinking about trying psychedelics, you need to get off your antidepressants, you know.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And just, you know, basic
just
information.
Cross-chemical issues,
yeah. And all of them were hearing it for the first time. And I was kind of astonished, you know. It's like, you guys are college
You're
kids.
astonishing me now that people who are already interested haven't done that basic.
Yeah, and it's a failure of our
101
education system,
homework.
and it's Nancy Reagan's fault, you know.
I mean, partly, but now people have Google. If they're just interested in something, they can go to arrowhead.com right now.
Yeah, and you and I do that all the time, but you know, these kids don't do that. You know,
it's fascinating.
They need assignments. They need to be given homework. Otherwise, it just doesn't show up for them. Especially because of the internet, because you can cherry pick your your reality. You
True.
know? You can grow up, even as an adult, you can cherry pick your news and just know nothing about what's happening, in the next state or wherever.
It's pretty spooky.
The next
stuff.
neighborhood.
It's pretty spooky stuff.
Yeah.
What do you think of the idea of when we, at least for me, I'll know that the human species is okay when we get to a point where like the vision quest comes back? It's kind of like now yoga. You can walk on the street and find a yoga studio. Like parents say, "All right, this is your initiation to adulthood. You're going to have your vision quest moment."
Yeah.
What do you think about that idea? To me, that sounds like I'll know the human race will be okay when that becomes an accepted thing. In
when the
Western
vision
culture.
quest becomes...
Just when parents like, I want my child to have a vision quest and understand life as a free being.
That's how I'm raising my kids, I mean...
Yes, thank you.
So I think we're going to be seeing more of that because I don't think I'm unique. I mean, I might be a freak if I go to Alabama or something like that, but...
There are freaks in Alabama,
but
too.
There's always freaks.
Spend some time in the South. There's some really neat characters down there.
That's true. That's absolutely true. But I think in order for it to become normalized, you need a critical mass. So I'm optimistic that there'll be
right. I was just reading about that today, too. The bell curve of people who innovate, and then the early adopters, and the I was reading about that. And you have to get a certain amount of early adopters before other just normal people become curious and less defensive.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I think we're getting close.
Yeah, I think so too.
I think we're getting really like now. I'm seeing like if I'm at the gym and I'm talking to like a software developer. Oh yeah, man, I've done that. Blah 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 blah. Other people's ears around me will perk up. Yeah. People I would never suspect.
Yeah.
Oh hey, I've always been curious about that.
Yeah.
To me, that's one of the most wonderful things because I was talking to Vito at my last podcast about the party he and I met at. I was talking because at the time that's when I was, curing a sleep apnea using magic mushrooms.
Is that right?
Totally worked.
Yeah.
Like I was the part of my brain that controls when I breathe. When I was sleeping, it wasn't working right.
Yeah.
And I had just read, magic mushrooms will rewire your brain. And I thought, dude, nothing else is working, and I'm going to die if I don't do this.
Yeah.
And I suffered memory damage too. Yeah. So I did the magic mushrooms with this intent, like I'm going to cure the sleep apnea, and it worked. Sleep apnea gone.
Wow.
Like I'm just suddenly able to breathe in my sleep again.
Wow.
And then the memory problem, because it's going to sound nutty on a video, but I forced myself twice a month to have like a heroic dose trip.
Yeah.
For
twice a month?
No, I mean, twice a month.
Yeah.
Every month for like 6 months straight.
Yeah.
And my memory center started to work again.
Wow.
And I could remember stuff.
Wow.
And then those PTSD like symptoms you get when you get to sleep apnea and you start panicking like why reality doesn't make sense because your brain's not working right. Yeah. All that faded out. And it was...
Wow.
To me, that's... Then later, years later, I saw those studies about neurogenesis with psilocybin. I'm like, yes, that works. My brain cells grew back. I even had an MRI done to say, hey, is there any damage in my brain? And no, you're fine. I'm like, what? Yes.
Wow.
I mean, there are parts of my life that are just gone.
That's
like
amazing.
I can't remember it.
That's amazing. I mean, you're like the self-made psychedelic man.
Knock on wood with that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But where was I going with that? That wasn't the story. There was a different story.
But that's great. I mean, that really, to me, I mean, to my ears, that sounds so healthy and so balanced, and it's unfortunately, obviously, highly illegal.
Well, yeah, which is
and that's the crime. That's the real crime,
which
right?
Is bizarre
because you cured yourself.
I mean, if I wasn't able to get that through illegal channels, I would have died.
Yeah, that
would have been the end result.
Yeah,
me going to the doctor saying what's wrong.
Yeah,
can you fix it?
It's really interesting. I actually have a disease called ulcerative colitis, which is in the family of irritable bowel syndrome.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
It's kind of like Crohn's. Crohn's and UC are like siblings. Anyway, one of the things I discovered about the medical community and my experience of being sick was that sometimes you need to go rogue. And so in my case, what that meant was fecal transplant therapy.
Oh, I heard about that. Yeah. A friend of mine who has Crohn's was talking to me about that.
So I was suffering. I had tried all these different drugs, and I had done some, kind of like you. Like I was looking online at all this sort of weird research. It wasn't really research. It was more testimonial because they hadn't gotten to the research yet.
Just gathering anecdotal data.
Yeah. So I found this doctor in New York. He was one of 2 doctors who was doing the fecal transplant procedure means taking fecal matter, taking shit from a donor who has a healthy digestive flora, right, in their system, taking their fecal matter and doing essentially a colonoscopy and depositing that fecal matter inside the colon of the sick person, and then that good fecal matter assimilates and spreads, and you benefit from you're essentially healing yourself with the donor's fecal matter. So that's the procedure. Then you have to do enemas of the good fecal matter. Most doctors are still not sure how much you have to do and for how long. But I was scheduled to have the procedure, and my wife was cleared as a donor, and he had taught us how to do the enemas, which basically is just buying a dedicated blender and mixing up shit enemas.
Wow.
So this was all through the guidance of my doctor, and then I got a phone call, a recorded message saying that the FDA had stepped in and my appointment for the procedure was canceled, and this was all going into clinical studies, and that if I wanted to do this, I would have to be a subject in a study. So I was like, well, that's inconvenient. All right, but I guess I'll be a subject. And then I didn't meet the prerequisites because you had to have this one particular thing called C. diff. And frankly, I'm not even sure what C. diff is, but I had it for a little while, and then I didn't when they tested me. So then it meant I couldn't be in a study. And it wasn't just one study, it was like all studies, right? And so now the one thing that I thought might work, I couldn't do. So I went back to my doctor and I said, what do I do? And he said, look, I taught you how to do those enemas. Just do them. So I started doing it. And it was weird. It's kind of like mixing up your own psychedelic milkshake.
I mean, talk about the cosmic oneness and comedy. Like, I'm picturing you with like a blender filled with shit going,
man. Totally.
This sounds like a Louis C.K. bit.
Yeah, it could very easily be. So we started doing them. The really cosmic weird thing was people have started to do this for a variety of reasons, and some of them have nothing to do with disease. It has to do with things like weight loss, because what they've found is that you can assimilate the metabolism of the donor. So if you have like a low metabolism and gain weight easily, you could inject fecal matter from somebody with a high metabolic rate.
Some people have done this for like mood change studies too, because there's a nerve mass there.
Totally.
And the way the bacteria works changes
the rabbit
your
hole
mood.
is so deep, right?
So if you get it from someone who's more happy than you are, you tend to become happier.
Yeah. Well, what I found was this whole new dimension to my marriage, because now I'm injecting my wife's poo into my system, and I started to become a little bit more like her. Like my metabolism shot up, and it was really weird.
Because all those bacteria that were affecting her behavior were now affecting your behavior.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It gets really freaky. But anyway, it totally worked on me. And since then, like I actually did eventually get into a study, but it wasn't until years and years later. And that was fairly recently. And unfortunately, I had a relapse, and they threw me out of the study. But again, I was faced with that problem. Like, this is the only thing that has worked for me. And even though I was in a study, I didn't have access to it anymore. And so now I'm back in the rogue position. And I'm doing them like once a month. It's kind of like your, twice a month heroic dose as like maintenance or something. Like, this is my maintenance. I do these.
How long do you have to have this as part of your lifestyle?
I think it's going to be lifetime.
Yeah.
I think I'm just going to, and that's not unusual. There are drugs out there that I could take that they've done no longitudinal studies on, and they're immunosuppressants. They're the same drugs they give to like cancer patients and people with AIDS, and it's just not ideal.
Yeah, sounds kind of could be dodgy.
It's addressing symptoms and not addressing the problem.
The root, yeah.
Yeah, this heals your gut, but it may be that you have to do a shit enema once a month.
Right.
That's what I'm finding, is that's what I have to. And so I'm doing this, and my doctor called to check in on me. This is a different doctor now. And she said, "How you doing? What are you up to?" And I told her, and she was blown away. And I was like, "Really? You're blown away? You have, this is, everybody knows this works, But the thing is, in order to do this in America, unless you're in a study, you've got to go rogue and just do it yourself. So what I learned throughout this whole thing is, I went from thinking, when you're sick, you just go to the doctor and they solve the problem. It's kind of like when your car breaks, you go to the mechanic, and
right.
and you don't understand what happens in there, and you don't want to know. Just pay the money and whatever, right? What I found was that even though this doctor knows so much, in this particular situation, in order to heal myself, I've got to become a little bit of a doctor myself and educate myself and take action myself, which is, I think, exactly what you did.
I have a question for you. I've read a little bit about this, and there's some people that just hypothesize that there might be some root cause that causes an imbalance, like something causing like psychological stress. Do you think there might be some hidden, deep down psychological thing?
Totally, and for that,
it's causing a chemical imbalance that...
Yeah, I think so. I think it's very psychological, and I think... I do think psychedelics help with that. It's hard to measure, it's hard to see, but I've seen flares in my colon. Like it becomes, what happens is it becomes irritated and inflamed and starts to bleed. It starts to hemorrhage, and that correlates with depression in my life. It correlates with stress, and those are two things that psychedelics can help with. So what I'm finding is that like the best way to heal myself is by taking psychedelics and shooting shit up my ass.
Terrific.
Oh, and meditating.
Oh yeah, well, you don't want to leave that one out.
No, I don't, because even though we're right in this like total mindfulness revolution thing, I remember when I first started teaching, and I wanted to do mindfulness in the classroom, and my boss told me, that's prayer. You can't do that.
Wow.
So, meditation may be mainstream now, but it wasn't always this way. And there are still people in this country who think yoga is the work of the devil,
Yeah. I still see that kind of stuff online on YouTube comments. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting pose. I wonder how that's done. Then, you're all going to hell. Satan invented this to steer you away from God. I'm like, I don't think that's how it works.
It's an interesting debate, actually.
Oh, hey, I remember how where that story was going earlier.
Oh, yeah.
When I was at the party, when I met Vito.
Oh, right.
I was telling people about how I cured my depression with psychedelics, and everybody kind of poo-pooed me at the time, like, I did that when I was a teenager, and I went to parties, and I'm over that, and aren't you a little old to be doing that? Yeah, I did that already, and I went through that phase, and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, have you healed yourself with some of your stuff? Oh, no, man, it was just fun, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you might want to come back to this. At the time, almost everybody at the party thought I was nuts. Now a lot of these people are messaging me like, hey man, I saw this study, or hey, I saw this group, or whatever, and I thought, it's starting to leak in. Yeah. I'm tooting my own horn as an early adopter. How about that? Maybe even an innovator, huh? Yeah. Well, pat myself on the back so hard, right? Alright gang, we'll see you in a little bit. All right, we're back. And what were we just talking about off camera?
Well, the early adopters. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I it's interesting. Like, do you know Ayelet Waldman? she wrote this book. I believe it's called A Good Day. And we had her in our Consciousness Hacking meetup. She gave a talk about her book, which is all about microdosing.
Okay.
And she's an intellectual. She was a public defender as well. She's married to Michael Chabon, who's a well-known novelist. She's very, very smart. When I introduced her, I think I said something about this is part of the psychedelic renaissance. We're seeing really smart people not only doing psychedelics but writing really provocative and interesting books about it. So one of the stories that she shared was she's written books before, and they've always tended to be on more serious topics, like I think she wrote a book about Israel and the Holocaust or something, and I haven't read them, but that kind of more grave, something intellectually more respectable than, say, psychedelics. And she was at an event in New England, kind of an intellectual hoity-toity event, and she was a little bit nervous about sharing her project of microdosing with these people, but at a certain point she was just like, fuck it, I'll be honest, and if anybody asks, I'll tell them. So she's having this conversation with this person, older person, probably a boomer, right? And she tells them her thesis about how microdosing with LSD changed her life. And the older person was like, oh yeah, makes perfect sense to me. Like in the 60s, we all did acid and it opened up new horizons, and I could totally see that. And so it went against her preconceived notion that she was going, because this person was senior and older, they would be more conservative, right? But so she realized in that moment, these aren't the people that are going to be difficult for me. These are not the people who I'm going to have to convince, right? The people I'm going to have to convince are actually her own generation, like the Gen Xers who grew up with all the propaganda and the skepticism, and maybe even the sort of or early adopter phenomena where they're like, yeah, I did mushrooms in college and I had a great time, but I don't see how that could be relevant now.
Right.
Those were the people that she realized were going to be hard to talk to or challenging to talk to about her project.
Well, that kind of reflects what I was thinking about MDMA for a while, because growing up with that as a club drug, Gen X generation, the people I saw doing it were all just, not to generalize a whole group, but mostly really loser-ish kind of people. People who go to a nightclub and fall asleep on the couch. Yeah. Just everywhere. Yeah. And they're all people who work like part-time at Subway. Right. And they spend all their time at the club. Yeah. Like, it was people like that. Yeah. That were my first introduction to MDMA. So I'm like, ooh, I don't want to do that, because I don't want to end up like those people listening to
that's like me with the nitrous.
Some boots and pants
that's
kind
exactly
of music,
like
and like working part-time at Subway. Like, to me, that sounded like hell. Yeah. That was like where
role models. You had no good role models. We didn't have any good role models.
Well, what's interesting is the people who did other psychedelics were all interesting characters. Yeah. I just didn't connect those things in my mind. So that lingering image of these people falling asleep at the nightclub and like puking on their friends and stuff, that's what I was stuck with. I was like, ooh, I don't want to be like that. Yeah. Then, once I learned about set and setting and everything and came back around to MDMA, I'm like, oh, I could put Ravi Shankar on my stereo and light some candles and do it here. I don't have to
go to the club.
I don't have to partake in their ism.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. So there's this whole, this kind of, this is why I think people don't, it's part of this sort of way of thinking of the substance as being inherently one way or the other. You know what I mean? Like when people say, oh, you take a psychedelic and it's just, it's a crutch, it's not really hard work. Like the traditional Buddhist line, that you can't get enlightened through a pill, like you have to actually do the hard work. Well, doing, the psychedelic experience really is not just one thing, it's many things, and it is what you make of it, and you have to make something of it in order, I think, for it to be therapeutic. You can't just be passive.
Well, it's a tool in the toolbox. Yeah. and for like life transformation.
Yeah.
And if you put in the work and the, I hate to say discipline because that's such a sexy word and people love to hear that.
Yeah.
But really the discipline of saying, this is what my week looks like.
Yeah.
These are my hardcore like crunch days and these are my relaxed days and this is how I have to do it. Because we're grown-ups and we have responsibilities and,
Yeah.
you know. But approaching it like a tool, kind of like, to go back to my favorite analogy for this, it's like going to the gym for your spirit.
Yeah.
That's really what it is. And like my wife and I had an argument about this, but she didn't understand it. When I cured my sleep apnea, she's like, what is all this psychedelic stuff you're into?
Yeah.
You know, because she's from a country where it's
Yeah.
taboo and
Yeah.
illegal, and I mean, it's illegal here, but not quite so taboo.
Right.
And so she's like, this is dangerous and scary and whatnot. And then she saw the result, like, whoa, this really helped you a lot.
Yeah.
And then she wanted to give it a shot herself.
Yeah, that's like my life too. It's kind of the same. So she wanted to give it a shot herself. How'd that go?
Well, before we get to that, she was like, I want to fix my problems myself. I don't want something to do it for me. And I'm like, no, it's not doing anything for you.
Right.
You got to do all the work.
Yeah.
It's like if you have to hammer a nail into a piece of wood, you can do it with your forehead. You really can. But it's better to have a hammer.
Yeah.
But then if you take a hammer and just run around smashing stuff,
It's not gonna
you're
work.
not using your hammer correctly.
Yeah.
Like, just when you have to hammer in a nail, use the right tool for the job. And I think of psychedelics that way too. Like, don't go crazy hoping for some magic fix to fix a problem that you don't understand yet. Instead, say, is this the right tool in my toolbox, or can I nip this with just like a meditation in the shower or something? And if that's the better tool, go with that.
Yeah.
Or if me going to the gym and hitting the heavy bag for an hour makes me get to where I need to go with that issue, there's no need for me to drop acid or whatever.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, if I can't get it any other way, I don't want to take a crazy medication that I don't need that's going to damage the way I think. Instead, I'd rather just dig in, fix the problem, and then be done with it, and then integrate it in my daily practice and say, hey, this is the lesson I learned. This is how I have to behave. I think a lot of it, people are scared of altering their habits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I found for self-development, it's all about altering your habits.
Yeah.
Not just doing it once and saying, haha, I fixed it,
Yeah.
but then keep going over it and over it and over it. Like doing push-ups. Like you don't get good at push-ups unless you do a lot of push-ups.
Yeah.
Sorry for rambling on about
No,
that.
no,
It's
I'm
just
totally,
something
you're
I've been thinking about
absolutely
a
right.
lot lately.
And I think there are evolutionary reasons for being resistant to change. You know, it's like change is a dangerous proposition. You're not entirely sure how it's going to work out. So those early adopters, you know, they tend to, you know, what's that phrase, like get trampled on? You know, they pave a way.
Oh, right. And then they get stampeded
Yeah.
by the people running up from behind.
Yeah, exactly. Or they might just fail, but then the people, you know, part of I think what's implicit in that is that some of those early adopters fail, and then the herd learns from that, but and goes in the same direction, but does it differently, and then benefits and reaps many of the rewards. Right?
I mean, that seems like a good parallel for just how the psychedelic movement progressed.
Yeah.
A whole lot of good stuff, a whole lot of scary, crazy mistakes.
Yeah.
Then the world kind of went, whoa,
Yeah.
pull back on the reins.
Yeah.
And then people are like, well, can we learn from these mistakes and do it in a more holistic way?
Yeah.
You know, rather than just trying to see spider demons. And how about we, you know, talk to our own inner demons and see what we can fix? Yeah. I mean, I'm not against doing psychedelics for fun, but just understanding the tool and using it correctly seems a pretty responsible choice.
Yeah.
Oh, we've been going on about psychedelics for a while. This is good.
I mean, at the end of the day, and this is one of the things that's kept me interested in Buddhism, is the autonomy that you have. Like, whether, you know, even though you may be part of an ism, there is no notion of an omnipotent God that can save you. Like, you have to save yourself. And in fact, nobody can do anything really. Like, if you follow the philosophy, you can make an argument that nobody can even really help anyone else. So, you know, in terms of spiritual evolution, in terms of aspirations for enlightenment or just a better life, everyone's different, and you have to decide for yourself and do it yourself. And that's a lot of autonomy. It's a lot of responsibility. But I think that's a good thing. So.
That reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. I don't remember where I read this, unfortunately. But it was, almost everything in life is outside of your control. And if you can relax and be okay with that, then you can take control of your actions and your reactions, which are the only things you can control ever. And I think like this whole lifestyle development angle, I guess, that we're putting on it, it's like you're claiming the process that your body has, like what we're talking about with the bacteria affecting your thoughts, like completely taking responsibility for your ability to act and react purely and clearly. That seems to be what this whole movement's about, really.
Taking responsibility.
Yeah. Another sexy phrase, kids. Isn't that what your parents always said growing up? Be responsible. Take initiative. And
do drugs.
They were right. Be responsible. Just use the right tools. Yeah. I don't know, man. I think we got it.
You think we got it?
I think we got it. What do you think, kids? Let us know in the comments section. Don't forget to subscribe. See, I didn't do this last time, so I'm like, subscribe to our channel. Come to the comment. Tell us how we're crazy. Thank you for listening this long. We appreciate it. Love you, and peace. Oh, that wasn't a peace sign. Yeah.
Nice. All right.
Thank you, dude. This was really great.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I'm really,
Well, thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
So easy. I was right over there.